Hi, my name is Christian Nansen. I'm an associate professor at UC Davis, and I've been invited to talk with you today about drought, irrigation, and pest management. I am in the Department of Entomology and Nematology, so I have a background in agricultural pest management, in insect management, but I've also worked as a technical director in a pest control company. So I also know a little bit about the commercial side of pest management and sort of have an idea of what it means to run a business, which I know that many of you are doing on a regular basis. And it impacts the presentation I'm going to be giving. There is a little bit of science in there, but it's very much related to how I see the combination of drought, irrigation, and pest management as an opportunity for you to differentiate your business and essentially take advantage of the threats, the challenges imposed by climate change, how we can use this to maybe how you can use this in a way to sell your business and maybe adjust your portfolio and produce services that really meet the client's needs and makes your business more profitable. My research is explained on my website, so you can look me up at UC Davis. You can also contact me by email if you want to know more specifically about it. I work a lot with insect ecology, with pesticides, testing of pesticides, and then we do a lot of work also with remote sensing, flying drones, and using optical sensing systems. And I'm going to bring some of that research into this presentation because I think a lot of future drought monitoring is going to be depending on use of sensors, and some of them are going to be stationary, some of them are going to be movable, so they can be on drones and other vehicles. So there's definitely a lot of technologies that I would strongly encourage you to look into, because I do think that they will be of relevance if you're not already doing it. I really think that there are ways that you can take advantage of this sort of technological revolution that is unfolding around us, not only with the sensors, but also with the data processing and data transfer and other things. How you can take advantage of that and turn that into business opportunities for you. And some of it I've explained and talked about it in this sort of series of lectures. It's an invited presentation, so you can go to my website, which this is the front page, and you can click on these individual images underneath, and you can sort of see, learn more about how these technologies work and potentially see links between what we're doing, maybe mainly in agricultural systems, how that also could be of relevance to you wherever you are. So the outline of this presentation, well, I'm going to talk briefly about drought as a concept. What is drought? Then I'm going to talk a little bit about soil, very, very briefly, but essentially I'm going to pitch to you that I think that soil core sampling, soil probing, and soil analysis and soil maps should be part of your portfolio, should be part of what you offer to your clients, because it's very hard to imagine effective drought management, effective irrigation practices if you don't know what soils are on your clients' properties. Then we're going to talk briefly also about how drought affects the physiology of ornamental trees. Why is drought such a serious challenge? I'm just going to briefly mention some insects and mites that are associated with drought, but this is really a long list, and it's going to depend a lot on where you are in the world. And I don't know, this audience could be rather large, so I don't know. Essentially, you're going to see an increase in risk of pests pressures as the trees on your clients' facilities get more and more drought stress. So it's basically a positive association. It's a given here. Then I'm going to talk more about the different aspects of how to deal with drought stress, and how I think this could be turned into business opportunities for you. I'm going to talk about evapotranspiration and sensors. I'm going to talk about sunscreen for plants, which is a concept you may not have heard of before, but it's actually very old, and but also very interesting. And I think there would be a lot of facilities, a lot of clients that would, if you're not already talking with them about it, I really think you should. And then finally, I'm going to summarize this whole thing and really sort of turn what I have been sharing with you today into a list of what I would consider business opportunities, essentially individual elements that I think you should seriously consider when you look at your sort of the strategy for how you're going to be moving forward, and maybe also the people you want to hire. Who are the people that, if you're going to expand your business and you have some people retiring, who are you going to replace these people with? What are the skills that they should have? How are some of these things that I talk about, some of these technologies that I'm going to be talking about, in what ways could they be part of your portfolio? And to what extent are you yourself and the employees you currently have, how are they capable of dealing with this? Or do you need people from outside to come and help you with this? Maybe you need to hire them. Maybe there are companies in your area that you already know. Maybe you play golf or go fishing with somebody who's already working with something similar. Well, maybe you could team up with them, and they could be part of your future strategy. So in essence, this presentation is very much, I think, I'm trying to make it very positive, very constructive. I'm not talking so much about climate change and how it's going to make it challenging for everybody to sort of do their business. No, in fact, I'm going to flip it around and argue that because of the challenges that the changing climate are imposing on us, I think there's a lot of business to be made, and there's a lot of people who are concerned about their ornamental, the aesthetics, the ornamental outline, the of their facilities. So I think you are in a very interesting position to potentially have a very profitable and meaningful business in the future. And that's sort of what I'm trying to convey to you by giving you some options to consider. So let's start at the very beginning. Drought, right? What do we think? What is drought? And surprisingly, just like with so many other basic concepts, we actually struggle with a clear definition of it. But what we can say, it basically has to do with a combination of time and use need of water, right? So when plants experience prolonged water deficit, meaning meaning essentially this, right? When the availability and time is that the combination of those two factors is smaller than the need of the requirements of water that the plants have, that is when we consider a plant drought stressed. But it's really important to remember that it's not like a yes no. Yes, this tree is drought stressed, this one is not. There's a very, very wide range. There's a lot of gray area here in between. So we can't really sort of make it dichotomous or binomial where we say yes, no. It's sort of, on a continuous scale. And really what we're hoping to do, of course, because it's so uh, poorly defined and such a gradual process. The idea here, of course, is we want to detect it as early as possible, just like with diseases like cancer or other serious health issues that people might face. It's the same thing. We want to catch it as early as possible and uh, implement our mitigative strategies as early as possible so that we don't have all the downstream consequences of drought. And where it really sort of gets tricky, where it gets very complicated, of course, in terms of drought definition, whether and what how much water does a given tree need? Well, of course, it's because species vary in their water requirements, right? So we know that. We also know that the growth stage of the plants, of the trees, um, vary in terms of their need for water, and during the season, there's also considerable difference in their need for water, how they were planted, what sort of communities they were part of. So how much water is actually being used by the adjacent trees or shrubs or other plants. It has to do with the root architecture of that particular tree. So that's of course with the tree species, but that also is impacted by the soil characteristics. So the physics of the soil, the particle size. So how deep are the roots? How lateral are the roots of that particular tree compared to the traditional structure of that tree? How far down is the groundwater, right? And you can even argue that soil mycorrhiza and rhizobacteria, all those microorganisms in the soil that are helping the trees, what's called the symbionts, they are basically helping the trees take up nutrients and water, just like we have a lot of symbionts in our gut to convert the food that we eat into small molecules that can be absorbed through our gut, right? The same thing with the roots. They also have lots and lots of microbial organisms living on them and helping them in the process of acquiring water and nutrients. So in a very healthy soil, that capability of microorganisms such as fungi, mycorrhiza, and bacteria helping the plants, the chance of them doing a good job is higher. So you have what is sometimes referred to as a higher resilience. You have trees growing under conditions that allow them to cope better with water deficits, simply because the water that's in the soil is being made more available to the plants through the aid of these symbionts, these microorganisms. So you can also argue that one of the things, if you really want to help your clients having um, less drought stress trees and shrubs and other plants, well, you need to improve the soil quality. So, but we'll get to all of that here in a little bit as we move along. So and so this sort of left side of the slide basically just outlines some of the main reasons why individual trees, it's very hard to estimate or predict whether a given tree is drought stress. And of course, what you then have on top of all that variability to the left, you also have the fact that just because you are pumping out water out of a spigot or a faucet somewhere, that and therefore think that the plants shouldn't, your trees shouldn't be drought stressed. Well, they can still be drought stressed because you may still have runoff, you may have system leaks somewhere in your irrigation system. It may be surface irrigation, so it's actually not penetrating deep down to where the active root zone is. It's staying in the top part of the soil. Based on the physics of the soil, the water is actually not penetrating down to where the roots really uptake the water. So even though there is water in the soil, it's actually not coming to the plants, to the trees where it needs to be. But of course, you can also have system leaks. You can have an old or inefficient irrigation system. So I don't know how much time you're spending on irrigation systems, but that's definitely something I want to talk about, and something that I would recommend you becoming an expert in is having flow meters and having sensors and charge your clients for these kinds of tools that allow you and them to see how effective this system, this plumbing system you are implementing in their facility, how effective it is, and maybe even how you can save them a lot of water, because now you have a much more effective system, and that you're really timing the delivery of water to the time period when and where the plants need it. So you can turn parts of the system off. You can have sort of valves, and some of this can be automated from an app, so you can do it automatically, or the client can do it him or herself. So it becomes kind of cool and somewhat sexy to irrigate. And I think that's a perfect example of how something that could be considered a challenge could actually be flipped around and turn into an opportunity and something where you could really differentiate yourself and have a service that goes above and beyond what the competition is offering. So really important to remember that different soils have different water holding capacity and also different availabilities of water, right? So just because you pump so many gallons of water into a particular surface area doesn't mean that water necessarily becomes available to the soil. So you need to be a little bit of an expert on this and actually read up a little bit on your soil sort of physics, um, and maybe ask for soil maps. And this is a fair question, I think. Have you ever um, approached a client and showed them soil maps of their facilities? If not, I would try to get some of those, and I would put that into your portfolio as part of your service. So when you set up a new client, when you set up a new customer, somebody where you're going to be going in the future, well, have them sit down and look at the maps, look at the soil maps of the layout of that landscape, and try to figure out what's going on, and explain to them a little bit about how irrigation over here is going to be a little bit different from over here because of these soil characteristics. So you're really showing them that you know what you're doing, what they're gonna get into by collaborating with you, and you are engaging them in the process of setting up your advanced irrigation system. And you should definitely also, and this is a way to make some good money here, is charge them for either yourself or have a company come out and take soil core samples. So if there are a lot of trees, maybe you need to go rather deep, but really get samples so you have a very good understanding of the underlying foundation of where of the landscape there, meaning what is the soil, not just in the top foot, but also further down. So how effective is irrigation going to be here? And use that in your conversation with your client about how you're going to set up your irrigation system. That's really, really important and really a way to sort of convey professionalism. And remember that and you can look this up, these are just sort of screenshots I've taken from readily available publications that you can look up. So obviously, so the more clay, the size of particles has a lot to do. So this has to do with the surface area, and water will attach to the surface of these soil particles. So the bigger your soil particles, the more sand you have in the soil, basically, the less water it can hold. Um, but it also drains. So small particles will capture a lot of water, but it will also drain very capturing, meaning that it sticks to the soil, but that also means that it doesn't come as far down, so it doesn't seep through. So if you need to get very deep, well, then it's actually a good idea to have some sand in there. So it's not one or the other. But look at these profiles, look at these, learn about this more generally. This is not something we will get into, and not something I'm even able to explain well enough. I'm just highlighting how I would encourage you to learn more about soil types, and how the different soil types have different water holding capacity and also different availability of water. And you can actually potentially, if you are in a client's facility where the water availability is very, very low, well, a simple way to sort of add to this would be, or to mitigate this, would be to propose that some organic matter is being added to the soil, right? So you can go in and offer that as a service, that because organic matter has very, very large surface area. The individual particles have a lot of surface, and that means that they can hold a lot of water, and it becomes readily available to the soil. Plus you get a lot of microbial organisms. Many of them are these rhizobacteria that can help the plant in nutrient uptake, and also water uptake. So this is very, very ways that you can really make the soils at your clients' facilities more healthy, and therefore help them get better bang for their buck. Where the money being invested in irrigation can be end up having a better impact on the soil. It doesn't on the plants. It doesn't evaporate. It doesn't leak. It doesn't go where we don't want it to go. So definitely look into the soil as part of your portfolio. How can you help your client have a healthier soil? How can you offer services that make the soil more healthy, having a higher level of water holding capacity, and make the water that is in the soil more available to the plants that the client wants you to grow. And of course, when we talk about tree physiology and we talk about the long-term effects of drought, I mean, there's a long of them, and the obvious ones are, of course, that the overall biomass goes down because the leaves can't grow, the stems can't extend, the roots can't grow, so it cannot move into new parts of the soil and take up more nutrients. So overall growth is just being shut down, right? But that's really not what we're looking at, because we know that, and we don't. I mean, you would probably get fired if all the trees die and get to this stage where you have significant reduction in biomass. So this is not really what is interesting. The more interesting are the sort of the short-term effects, and how we can potentially detect them at a very early stage. Because what of course happens is as part of photosynthesis, the small openings in the leaves, these stomata that are used to sequester carbon dioxide, they close because the plant is worried about losing vapor. So even though it needs CO2 to perform photosynthesis, it is equally worried about losing its existing moisture. So it closes its opening, these stomatal openings in the leaves, and that means that it doesn't take up CO2, which means that photosynthesis cannot work. So there's a reduction in photosynthesis. We'll come back to that here in a little bit, and why that is important. Also, sort of physiological processes like membrane transport and membrane structures are actually damaged in the individual leaf cells, and enzymatic processes that are linked to the photosynthesis. So just sort of the basic metabolism, the engines that run the plant itself, the primary metabolism, are compromised, are slowed down and to partially compromised. So the plant is not as efficient in all the things that it needs to do in order to stay healthy, maintain itself, but also grow. And where I really think it's important to look at it, it's not, we shouldn't be looking at drought necessarily of how much water we're putting into the soil, or exclusively look at how much water we're putting into the soil and what is the soil characteristics and whatnot. We should really, if we want to determine how much a given tree or a certain area in a facility, in a client's property, how much drought stress is going on, we need to look at the plants themselves. We need to ask, quote unquote, ask the trees themselves, how are you doing today? How drought stressed are you? And obviously the trees don't talk a language per se, but they actually give off signals that we can use. So there are definitely ways that we can sort of use advanced technologies that are becoming more and more abundant and more cost effective and more reliable to actually essentially ask the plants, how drought stressed are you today? And the first way I would say is, well, let's fly a drone. Let's just, and this is of course a cornfield, so it's not somebody's backyard. It's not a large sort of corporate facility. But if you're walking on this road here, you may not be seeing this, but just getting in the air is an incredible source of information. Just having a drone with a simple camera fly over the client's facility and get a map and show them these maps, not just for you to analyze, but also to show your clients. Say, hey, like, come over here, I want to show you something, or put this in a slick report, and really demonstrate to them there's something going on over there. Okay, there's something we don't know what it is, or you can really look at how, or maybe you can use it before and after. So you have some images before where this irrigation system that was old didn't work. Now you put in some new irrigation system, and boom, there you go. Now you can see that the plants are doing much better. So without any analysis, just having a visual of what is actually going on can help you immensely, and can also save you a lot of money, because you can then, if you are overseeing a lot of people, or you yourself are very busy, you can find out where you need to go at a given time. So if you have somebody flying a drone for you, you could say a week before or 3 days before you're going out to a facility, out to a property, you could then have that map or that image on your tablet or something, and use that to see where you need to go and spend most of your time. So it can help you save money, and it can really help you engage in a sort of conversation with your client about how is everything looking? Is everything healthy? So if you don't have a drone pilot, maybe this is the next hire you need to have, right? That's sort of one of my first pitches here to you is, do you have a drone pilot? And maybe that's something you should be looking into. So if we go down that path, and then say, well, maybe you've now agreed that this is not a bad idea, then you could sort of, there are different levels of drone technology that you can sort of be willing to spend money on. Okay, so the cheapest and sort of simplest is just a similar to what I mean, all these companies that are now, these photographers that are now doing wedding photography with drones, and real estate agents that have all these drone pilots fly over these real estates that they're trying to sell to make 3D models of everything. Well, you could do the same thing. You could have an advanced wedding photographer help you out in your business. So have that as a side job. What we're really talking about here is we're using the leaf reflectance as a way to diagnose drought stress. And you remember a couple of slides ago, I was talking about how these enzymatic processes are being compromised, how photosynthetic activity is going down. Well, what that means is that and this is sort of the basic, what you see here to the left, these hyperspectral profiles are basically the reflectance profiles of leaves. And the reason why they're green is because in this part, in the visible part of the spectrum, you can see that the relative reflectance is highest in the green. It's higher in the green than it is in the blue and in the red, and that's why the plants are green. Okay, but then what happens is when a plant is drought stressed or stressed by other factors such as pests or not enough nutrients, the photosynthesis is compromised, and that means that the reflectance actually goes up because the plant is not absorbing that light as well as it should to perform its photosynthesis. So we can use generally an increase in reflectance as an indicator of drought. That is something that is very, very well established, that plants that are drought stressed will reflect more light than healthy plants, simply because they can't absorb the light. So that light that is coming from the sun, instead of being absorbed, is now being reflected back to the atmosphere. And so if we have an idea of what a healthy plant should look like, we can then, and use that as a reference, we can then show that these drought stressed plants reflect more light. And there are some indices. So these are basically band ratios that are being used to this and used to detect these phenomena such as drought. So you probably heard, if you're a little bit into remote sensing and use of drones and optical sort of spectral analysis of leaf, you probably heard of NDVI, which is this normalized differential vegetation index. It is essentially a relationship between the reflectance out here in the near infrared compared to down here in the red, right? So it's basically the height, the altitude, the sort of the magnitude of this red edge, which is this huge increase in reflectance right around 740 nanometers. Okay, so it's the height of that, and that height increases the more healthy a plant is. There are a whole bunch of indices out there, and people like myself that look at this, and plant physiologists that's all they're doing is just developing these indices that where several bands are being compared and used to as indicators of different stress. So this is something that you can sort of use, and where depending on the companies that you are willing to work with and what the services they offer, well, they may not have hyperspectral profiles, but they may have cameras that can give you some of these indices, and you can definitely use them as a very, very interesting and powerful way to convey to your client how well you're doing, and or where the problems are. So here's an example of a study that I found from oak trees, and you can see the same reflectance profile as you saw before. But what you're seeing here is that they actually experimentally treated the trees differently. So LAI stands for leaf area index. So this is basically how much biomass they have. And you can see that the green one here, just like I said, has a very steep red edge. So there's a big increase from down here in the red light up here into the near infrared. So this has a very high NDVI. But you can see as they start to lower the leaf, the biomass, and also to start impose stress on the plants, this red edge completely changes. So you can see how we can infer based on the reflectance data acquired from the plants. We can basically ask the plants, how are you doing today, simply by looking at their reflectance profile. So, and we can use some of these indices to quantify how well they are doing because of this shift in red edge. And you can also see down here the two that have stress, right? You can see there was an increase in reflectance down here in these spectral bands, which is exactly the visible part of the spectrum. So and this is not that they necessarily look different. The human eye may not be able to see it, but the cameras can. And here's an even more advanced study of trees, where they actually first outline the trees themselves, and then they analyze the individual pixels, and then they use this index, this other index, this PRI, which I just showed on the previous slide as well, but where they actually categorized each of the trees. So you can see not all of the trees perform the same way. But imagine you having something like this to offer your clients, right? This would be absolutely fantastic. And I'm sure you could charge them much more for your services if you were able to offer them something like this and demonstrate before and after that the trees were very drought stressed and now they're not. So even though you're just using irrigation water better, maybe not more of it, but using it more efficiently to get a much better outcome. So this is really part of quality control, where I really think you can engage with your client. And of course, I mentioned the membrane damage and compromised enzymatic activity as some of the consequences of drought. Well, what happens is, because of that loss of membrane structure and transport over membrane, you actually have a buildup of nitrogen-rich intermediate compounds in the cells and in the vascular tissue. So it means that the plants become more juicy, they become more nutritious. And that's one of the reasons why we have typically an outbreak of pests as a function of drought. So drought in itself is causing a problem, but then you also have pests sort of building on top of that. And also because the stomata are closing, so then normally the plants would recruit natural enemies that would then come and help the plant control the pests. Well, because the stomata are closed, it basically means that the signaling, the recruitment of natural enemies is also being reduced. And finally, the plant, of course, just like we have an immune system, the plant has its own battery of inducible defense compounds. So these are toxic compounds that it would produce in response to a pest outbreak. Well, because the metabolism is not working, it basically means that the plant is not able to defend itself. So it's not able to resist these attacks by insects and mites. So that's why we see a lot of sort of pests sort of becoming more prevalent. These are just some of them, but uh, that really become much more abundant when we have a drought stress problem, drought stress vegetation. So it really, drought is just the first part of a problem that very, very quickly can get out of control if it's not being mitigated. So how do we monitor this? How do if we now agree that drought is something we have to worry a lot about, and we also agree that there are ways we can improve the soil, we can definitely look into the irrigation system and do other things, and we can maybe even fly drones and have data collected from the trees themselves. Well, what other sources are there of information that we can gather and we can potentially sell as services to our clients? And of course, evapotranspiration and measurement of that is something that I think is really, really important. And as part of this sort of intel we need to collect, so we have as good an understanding of the problem as we possibly can. So the evapotranspiration is of course the sum of the transpiration from the plants themselves and also the evaporation just from the bare soil itself. So you can access uh, websites where there are maps available for, and US is a spectacular place to get data for free. USGS, United States Geological Services, have lots of resources available to you. This is just one of them, and I'm sure there are also private services that are taking these satellite images and other services and turning them into to applications that might be of relevance to you. But you can essentially look up what is the evapotranspiration and maybe get reports or generate the reports yourself, sort of on a monthly or whatever time interval you want them, and show them to your client. So you have an understanding of when do we need to irrigate and how much do we need to irrigate, right? So this is sort of at a coarser level, because of course the spatial resolution of these satellite image based maps is not super high, but it and it also of course depends on the size of your client's facility. But yeah, this is definitely a resource I would encourage you to look into. But you can also buy very there are a whole sleet of advanced irrigation systems. I'm not in any way sort of affiliated with Open Sprinkler. I'm just mentioning them. I have that system myself in my own backyard, and I'm really I like it. I think it works really well. It's an open source that can be programmed. You can add your own sensors to it, so that's why I find it kind of cool. You can control it on your phone, so I could actually take this phone and I could right now I could turn on my sprinkler in my backyard just from this system because it's connected to Wi-Fi. So there are ways you can dazzle your client by showing applications like this and include that into your system. So if you don't already have somebody in your business that knows a lot about smart irrigation systems, well, maybe that's another hire you need to look into, or affiliate yourself with a company in your area that does this kind of work, because this is really a perfect way to combine with monitoring of evapotranspiration, having smart irrigation, having pressure valves sort of throughout to make sure that there are no leaks. Really, really important, and definitely a way you can really show professionalism and also be a responsible contributor to more sustainable ornamental sort of landscape management. You can go even further. You can have these sort of clip-on sensors that can be together in a in a sort of grid, and you can maybe have them connected to advanced weather stations. You can use this kind of technology to generate maps and figures and reports and really show your client that you are serious about drought management, and that your whatever you are charging them for is actually working. and because of that, you're going to have less diseases and whatnot. So this is really your way to engage with your client. This is really your way to professionalize your service and show them that this is that you're not just sort of mowing the lawn and sort of pruning a few branches here and there. No, you are a serious professional that is offering something that is really, really valuable to them, and you're really contributing to the health. The fact that you are there means that the plants on the facility are healthy and that they are being grown in a very responsible way with the minimum use of water and with the right soil and whatnot. So you're really sort of taking care of their backyard, literally, which I think is very important. Then there's this concept of sunscreen for plants. Well, where's that coming from, and what does that really mean? Well, in agriculture, it has existed for a long time, and here in California, where I am, you see it quite a bit, especially in orchards. But this is actually a picture I took when I was working on corn in Texas. So one of the products is essentially kaolin clay, right? So it's this very, very white kaolin sort of mineral that is milled in a very, very fine powder, then put into formulation, and then you can spray it onto your plants. So why is this white powder so powerful? And it's essentially what you also put on greenhouses, right? So it's the same kind of material. But of course you don't want to completely cover your plants, because then they can't perform photosynthesis, and then they also look maybe not as aesthetic as the client wants. But during sort of the hottest part of the summer, maybe especially in places like here in California, it may be worthwhile, because what this sort of spray treatment does, well, it's very, very white, and of course it reflects a lot of the UV light that the plant is also very susceptible to. It's not just us. It's not just the reason why we use sunscreen is, of course, to protect us from UV light. Well, plants have the same problem, and they can't go to the shade or whatnot. So their cuticle is protecting them somewhat, but we can actually help them boost that protection against damaging UV light by putting on a sunscreen. By doing that, we also expand the photosynthetic activity period during the day, because if it gets too hot, then the plants actually shut down. So they have a shorter period of, if they are drought stressed and if they are very hot, they will actually have a shorter period of time during the day when they can actually perform photosynthesis, and that becomes a problem. Because we are reflecting all this light now, we are also lowering the leaf temperature, which means that they have to transpire less water in order to stay cool, because of the enzymatic processes that don't take place when it's too hot. So we ultimately lower their water requirements. And there are some studies that also suggest that the use of this can actually lower the pressure of certain pests, because maybe they are disoriented. The plants don't look the way they should, so they can't really, quote unquote, find the plants. But also because of the metabolism of the plant is working much better, it can then defend itself. It can recruit natural enemies and all these other things that I mentioned on the earlier slide. So it's the overall sum is that these plants have less pests. So this is definitely something I think you should talk with your client about and think about. There may be applications, maybe certain clients that are interested in this. This is definitely something, if you haven't tried it yet, I would definitely look into this. There are lots of not lots, but there are several products out there that are good candidates for this. So to sort of get to the end of this, I really hope that I've demonstrated to you that drought mitigation is, of course, a problem for the client, but it's also a scenario that offers a lot of business opportunities for you. You can work with soil amendments. You can work with soil core mapping, soil sampling, find soil maps, and charge for that, and really use that, especially when you set up new accounts. to make sure that you sort of look at those maps and look at irrigation practices, look at how the irrigation is set up, and maybe have sort of valves to turn on and off portions of the irrigation system, have that sort of based on where the soils vary, because there may be soils that need more irrigation water than others. So this is really a way to sort of in your initial engagement with clients can really come across as very professional. You may also help them realize this soil mapping. And initially, you may be also suggesting to them, well, maybe we should replace some of the trees because these trees are grown over in a soil that requires a lot of water. So either we're going to spend a lot of money on water, or we're going to plant something else that could be as aesthetic but require much less water. So you can sort of help them use the soil maps also to figure out what needs to be grown where. You should definitely, I would, if you're not already doing that, really sort of think seriously about advanced irrigation monitoring. I mean, everybody nowadays has some sort of a smart watch, how many steps they take and whatnot. We are all fascinated about these numbers. Well, you can turn your accounts into number generating machines, right? You can give the client numbers on how much water they are spending, what water is going where. They may not today appreciate that, but they might, and maybe not all of them, but some of them probably will, and find this kind of fascinating that you're making them both more efficient but also more sustainable long term by keeping numbers and track of all of this. And definitely take that a couple of steps further and look into how you can collect data from weather stations, from different sensors that can be put in the soil, can be monitoring the canopy. You can fly drones, so you have maps and visuals of what's going on. I really think those are there are a lot of options in that category, and something you should look into. And then finally, sun protection, sunscreen. Where can that be applied? Would there be scenarios where that makes sense? So in reality, I'm arguing that climate change is a problem, and it definitely is something we want to take very, very seriously. But it's also an opportunity for more business for you if you embrace it, if you look at what sort of options are available to you. And I think with that, you can really gain your clients' trust and engagement. Not only their trust in that you're doing it, but also have them sort of become part of the process and see the data, see the maps, see the reports, see the trends. And in that way, that you're going to have a relationship with them, which is going to make them clients for life. It means that they're going to come back to you with more business. They definitely want to keep you on payroll for a very, very long time, because you can make this landscape managing using these technologies, make it unique and very compelling to them. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me by email. And I definitely want to thank Allison and the rest of the Tree Care Science team for allowing me to contribute with this presentation. Thank you very much.